Your brain does not want you to be happy. My brain certainly doesn't want me to be happy. I say this because I had an experience a few weeks back that made me realize this. Well, I've always sort of known this deep down, but the experience I had is sort of what inspired me to make this. So, a few weeks back, I was taking a walk. I was taking a walk down the riverside area, which is near a pub, and it was 5 p.m., but it was getting close to 6, so it was nearly 6 o'clock, and the pub stopped serving food. Their kitchen closed. Hold on, I might be getting confused. It might not have been 6, it might have been closer to 7, but all right, let's say 7. It was getting close to 7 o'clock, and the entire time while I was walking back on the riverside path, I was thinking to myself, it would be really nice if I ordered a bowl of nachos there. The pub in question, by the way, why does this keep happening? God damn it. They have this stupid tilt. So their kitchen offers a side plate of nachos, which is very delicious. It's got melted, I think, Monterey Jack cheese, sour cream, and salsa. And it's something that I like to enjoy every now and then. It costs about £8. Well, that's the typical experience of eating out anywhere since the pandemic and stuff like that. So I was in a bit of a conflict as I was approaching the pub, because it was getting close to 7 p.m. and I was thinking to myself, I could order a bowl of nachos if I wanted, but it would set me back £8, and I've allocated to myself a budget, and I have to be responsible with that. So if I order the nachos, I'll feel better in the short term, and I'll feel bad in the long term, because it's going to set me back £8, probably more than that, because I'm most likely going to want a drink too. So I was in a bit of a bind, but it occurred to me while I was there. Why does this keep happening? It's so stupid. The entire time it occurred to me, no matter which choice I make, I'm just not going to be happy either way. Whichever choice I make will inevitably feel like the wrong choice. I'll feel guilty for having given in to my hunger and eating the bowl of nachos and the drink, because I always order a drink when I go there. And I'll have felt guilty for not having ordered it by the time that it got to 7 p.m. and the kitchen had closed down. So that would have been like a missed opportunity. Now, this blatantly anodyne and mundane example of the sort of inner conflict that goes on in your mind while you're making everyday decisions, it sort of elucidated to me a simple fact about well, being alive, is that your brain likes to remind you that you've made bad choices, and in a sense, every choice you've ever made is a bad choice. You've always made the wrong choice. They say, right, that hindsight is 20/20. So if you made a choice which at the time turned out to be a bad choice, you can't be in a position to know what the outcome of that choice would have been. But none of this matters to the mind, because the mind loves to torment you. It likes to haunt you with visions, with counterfactual scenarios of what could have been had you made a different choice. it doesn't really serve any fundamental purpose other than to torment you, to torture you. Thinking back on this, there have been loads of times. That is just one isolated example I could think of. But I certainly can't have been the only one to have been put in a dilemma like this. How many times have you been out shopping, trying, on the one hand, thinking, I mustn't spend too much money. On the other hand, thinking, this is on sale. It's probably not going to be on sale. It's probably going to go out of stock if I don't buy it fast. And even after you've stuck to your guns and decided not to purchase something or to purchase something, after having carefully weighed each option and consideration together, even hours later, by the end of the day, you will still dwell on whether you did the right thing. Another thing this experience reminds me of is there's a visual novel video game that I played quite some time ago. It's called Zero Escape: Virtue's Last Reward. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's the second game in the Zero Escape, or 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors franchise. Now, the game is a visual novel, so for those of you who don't know, visual novel games are games which don't have typically a linear storyline, but there are multiple different outcomes that can be achieved depending on which choice is made at which critical juncture throughout the game. Many of them have multiple different endings. Some of them are bad endings. Many of them are sort of neutral but interesting, plausible what-if scenarios that can eventuate depending on at which point in the game you decide to embark on a different course of action. You make a different choice which leads you down a different tangent, which leads you to a different future. But some of them are just bad endings, and they only exist to remind you of what can happen if you make the wrong choice. Although in the case of a lot of visual novels I've found, sometimes you have to encounter the bad endings before you can finally unlock the good endings, or the true ending. Because that's another thing. A lot of visual novels have a true ending and a wide variety of alternative false endings, which you typically have to explore first in order to get to the true ending. Now, I brought up the example of Virtue's Last Reward because there are loads of different endings. Most of them are bad endings. And most of them are just, they leave you with a bad taste in your mouth. Irrespective of what information you had at the time, many times in the game, often you will be led to believe that you're making the right choice, but the game will present you with a bad ending, and you will feel like a terrible person. There's one very specific game mechanic in Virtue's Last Reward which illustrates this perfectly. It's the Ambidex voting game. So in the Ambidex voting game, you and this other character, by the way, the plot of the game is something like you and 16 other participants have been locked away in this secret chamber somewhere in the moon, and you all have to work together to solve puzzles, to escape and return back to your home. Also, figure out who you guys are and what you're doing there, that sort of thing. And the Ambidex voting game is an interesting component because it basically pits the individual participants against each other. You have the option of picking ally or betray. And depending on the outcome of the voting game, you are awarded with certain points. If both participants pick ally, they both get, I think, 1 point. But if one participant picks ally and the other picks betray, the former gets 0 points, but the latter gets 2 points. So there's an incentive there to betray the other person, which is what makes the game quite interesting. Now, in the case of, there are many times in the game where there are two side-by-side counterfactual scenarios. There are these situations, these very specific situations where, on the one hand, you will pick ally, your opponent will pick betray, leading to a bad ending where the other person will shout at you and say, "Why did you betray me? How could you do this? You've set me back X amount of points. You're so selfish." And the main character will have an internal monologue, rationalizing what's just happened, reflecting on what a terrible person he is. How could I have done this? I'm so sorry. I'm so pathetic. But then in the opposite case, if you pick betray, you'll find that your opponent, the other participant, he will pick betray. You pick ally, he will pick betray, and then you'll be made to feel like a sucker for not picking betray as well. I never really liked that game. It was, I don't have good feelings about the game. And that is sort of the main reason why. Because the game likes to torment your conscience and use it against you by presenting you with an array of different choices. However, each choice you make will inevitably result in a bad outcome. Every choice you make is the wrong one, pretty much. There is a positive ending, but the positive ending doesn't really outweigh, it doesn't compensate for all the bad endings, because there are far more bad endings, far more neutral alternative endings, bad endings, than there are good endings. And in a sense, I brought up this example because this is more or less what your brain does to you. Each time you will be presented with a dilemma of some kind, stuck between Scylla and Charybdis, thinking, should I buy this? Should I ask that girl out? Should I drive over there before they close down and get what I need to get? You have the option of choosing to do so or not, but whichever choice you make, you will always be left by the end of the day, perhaps even days or weeks later, thinking, if only I'd done the other thing. If only I'd made the other choice. And there's no real reason for this. By the way, I'm not suggesting that in many cases there aren't very simple cases where one choice is better than the other, considering all the circumstances and all the facts and all the information you have on hand at the time. Sometimes there is a better choice. But your brain doesn't like to dwell on whether you made the right choice. It rather likes to haunt your conscience, and convince you you're a terrible person by reminding you of what could have happened had you gone down the opposite route. There's so many times where this has happened, but right now I can't think of an individual one scenario where this has happened. But yeah, basically, the human mind has an inbuilt, it is skewed towards a negative bias. And this negative bias permeates throughout your, it affects your life, it affects your outlook in every way possible. And this is just one example of how your mind tricks you into being perpetually unhappy. No matter what you do, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.